Coming up on this episode of Freedom from Fire, we'll talk about a joint effort regarding a new initiative with the University of Pennsylvania. We'll also have our former Deputy Chief of Fire Prevention here to talk about his new role in the fire department. Stay tuned. Hello, and welcome back to Freedom from Fire. I'll be your host, Lieutenant Lisa Desamour. I'm currently stationed in our department's Fire Prevention Division, where community risk reduction efforts are a primary goal. Here at Freedom from Fire, we aim to improve your quality of living by giving you fire and life safety information. We also introduce you to our local safety partners. Philadelphia is home to the busiest ambulance service in the nation. We operate a total of 50 ambulances 24 hours, 7 days a week, with additional 5 ambulances during peak times when call volume is relatively high. In 2019, medical responses were up nearly 1.2%. EMS incidents for the past year totaled almost 275,000. We serve a population of approximately 1.5 million citizens, and Philadelphia is also home to several outstanding colleges and universities. In order to effectively mitigate our call volume for one local institution, the PFD teamed up with the University of Pennsylvania to create an alternative response unit called AR1. To talk more in depth about this substantial partnership, we have from the PFD Fire Paramedic Lieutenant John Albasy, and from the University of Pennsylvania, Chief Eugene Janda. Thank you so much, Chief. Thank you, Lieutenant. Thank you very much for coming with us today. I know I invited you guys kind of last minute, so I certainly appreciate you accepting the invitation. I always start in typical fashion with introducing yourselves, telling me a little bit about. So if you want to start, Chief?
I was born and raised in Philadelphia, and I went a little bit into the Army after I got out of high school. When I got out of high school, I eventually I went to Temple University, got a degree, and I was looking for something that was meaningful in life. Okay. And I started in the Sheriff's Department, and then switched to the Fire Department. I had the chance to go to the Police Department, but I decided fire was the best thing for me.
It absolutely is.
And in doing that, I felt that it was the best fit overall for me for all those years. I worked out all through the city at one time or another, and doing 23 years with the Philadelphia Fire Department. I still keep my EMT certification from those days. I was promoted to lieutenant, and then eventually to captain. And one of the most rewarding parts of my career was my last 6 years in the job, where I worked at the Philadelphia Fire Academy. Okay. And in that time, I got to see 650 firefighters go through and about 250 paramedics come into the department. It was very, very rewarding, and I still see those people today because I'm now out at the University of Pennsylvania for 20 years now. Okay. And when I'm out there, I still see people riding around that was involved in the class, and sometimes they're mid-level managers or even higher than that. And it's very good to see everybody from the old days.
Cool. I'm so glad you have that experience. Josh, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I've been involved in the fire service for about 13 years. I started when I was 17 years old as a volunteer in the Cinnaminson Fire Department in New Jersey.
Young. Okay.
Yes, started when I was in high school and started as a volunteer, and I just fell in love with it. So I tried to make it my career, became an EMT, started working as an EMT, got a job also as a firefighter in North Wildwood in New Jersey, worked there, worked for a few different places before becoming a paramedic and then coming to the Philadelphia Fire Department.
Awesome.
So now I'm a lieutenant, so a supervisor of paramedics in the fire department. I've been in this position for about a year, and before that I was a paramedic, mostly in North Philadelphia for about 6 years.
Best place to be a paramedic. Okay, awesome. And I always do that just so our viewers have a little bit of information who our guests are. So let's get right down to AR1. To open up with the questioning for that, how was the idea for AR1 actually brought to the table, Chief?
Well, actually, one of the things happened, we had an event out at the University of Pennsylvania, and it was a side-by-side burn along with other things. And it was a very rainy day before there, so it was we always call it the muddy field discussion. Okay. The commissioner showed up, and my boss, who is Vice President Maureen Rush, and she's also the superintendent of Penn Police. Okay. When she showed up, they got to talking, and they start talking about how students in Penn were afraid to go to the hospital for if they had some alcohol or things like that, or even sometimes with some other small issues that they had. Mm-hmm. So she also mentioned, I know that I heard the commissioner and them talking, and then when they were talking, they were saying that they didn't want the University of Pennsylvania to be a burden on the EMS system in Philadelphia. So they're probably the two major factors that came along to try to at least put the idea in motion. Okay. And as you know, things don't usually happen right away. It took some time to get it together. It
absolutely does. Don't we know it?
Yeah.
Okay, what was the determining factor? Something that said, okay, this is it, this is why we are actually going to put AR1 into service?
I think the idea of what we have now, which is a quick response unit that we designate AR1, came from our actual AR2, which is in service, our opioid response unit. Mm-hmm. That was in the works long before AR1 came to fruition, which was our opioid response unit operates in the Kensington area. It goes on overdose calls and helps connect people with drug and alcohol treatment.
Okay.
So the idea of having this quick response unit that can transport people without an ambulance involved was already an idea.
Okay.
So when Penn found out about this idea, it became, well, can we utilize this over at Penn?
Okay.
So that's where AR1 started. So we created this quick response unit because like Jean was saying, one of the ideas was people were becoming afraid of an ambulance. So maybe can we take the ambulance away, especially because a lot of these emergencies are of a lower nature.
Right.
They're alcohol related, they're cold and flu related.
Okay.
Do we need the ambulance to take these people to the hospital?
Gotcha.
Do we need to overutilize our resources in the fire department for these emergencies, which also happen about the same time in a small area, weekend nights in the university campus.
Of course, as most universities, absolutely. So you talked about not wanting to be a burden, and I totally understand that. So is there a different dynamic? So basically, are there calls received to a different dispatch? How is it filtered through? How do we know this is an AR1 call?
So we are dispatched, AR1 is dispatched anywhere within the Penn University area. Okay. We follow the same geographical location as Penn Police.
Okay.
And we're dispatched to any medical call in the area.
Okay.
While we're in service. Our in-service times are on, again, weekend nights. Most people on the campus, they utilize the University of Penn's communication center.
Oh, okay.
Every campus phone can connect to the communication center, and most people, employees, students, security, everyone, they know the number to Penn Communications. They call the number for any emergency whatsoever.
Okay.
Penn Communications contacts us and our fire communications, and then we respond to the call. When we respond, we also respond with an ambulance in case it is one of these cases where an ambulance needs to be utilized.
Perfect, because that was going to lead me to my next question, and you answered it. So is there special criteria that determines when AR1 will be dispatched. So you mentioned earlier about, cold and flu symptoms and maybe intoxication. So are those Q words or keywords?
So we get dispatched to any emergency whatsoever, because
Okay.
we're also an advanced life support unit, so we can mitigate any medical emergency that's thrown at us.
Okay.
Now, we have special criteria for transporting, doing our courtesy transportation for the students, as opposed to taking an ambulance. And that is, they have to be a student of the University of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
They have to have normal baseline vital signs. They have to have a complaint that is a low acuity nature, like nausea, vomiting, cold and flu symptoms.
Okay.
Any major medical symptoms, chest pain, difficulty breathing, anything like that, automatically goes to the ambulance.
So it escalates and they're getting
Yes.
transported definitely.
So we have a very strict criteria that our medical director has been involved with creating. That is our criteria for transporting.
Okay, thank you. What is, and I'll direct this question to you, Chief, what is the overall purpose of the initiative?
The purpose is to make sure that young students know that when they need help, they should get it. We don't want them trying to run away or actually trying to avoid if they've been drinking or something like that, to try to avoid going to the hospital. There's a medical amnesty program at Penn, and we want them to seek the help that they need. The second purpose, I think, is we, being good stewards, strong partnership, public and private partnership, and we know that the Philadelphia medic units work continuously all day and night.
Right.
And we don't want them coming to the campus if they're not needed for a medical, a high medical emergency rather than low acuity type of.
Right, because that essentially frees up another unit to respond somewhere else where they very well may be needed.
Exactly.
Okay, so maybe both of you can chime in a little bit. How do you believe this particular partnership has impacted the fire department?
For one, the ambulance utilization. We've seen that when we're interacting with a Penn student, about 70% of the time we're able to recall our medic unit and put them back into service to take another call. Overall, even all of our calls put together, about 50% of the times we're able to recall that medic unit and put them back into service. So we have a high rate of being able to utilize ourselves instead of a medic unit and put them into service to take other calls in the area.
That's great. I mean, that's what it's supposed to do. What's your perspective?
Well,
Chief?
I think the high-level administration of the university made a conscious decision to do this, and I think, there's a closer bond between the fire department and the University of Pennsylvania now.
Absolutely.
And I feel good about that because basically I was in both organizations. I'm still in one, but the other one I was in.
Yeah.
And one thing I got to say though is with Josh, I know we have a Penn Medical Emergency Response Team on campus, and him and his partner Matt Brower, and there are other people that come in when of course Josh has to take off. They've been kind of mentors to the Penn Medical Emergency Response Team. They're all EMTs. And they look to the ARU people.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Chief, Josh, thank you for taking the time with us. I appreciate everything that you've shared with us today. We're going to take a break, a short one, but when we return, we'll hear from Deputy Chief Troy Gore as he highlights the integral role of the Incident Safety Officer within the Philadelphia Fire Department. We'll be right back.
Wake each morning and get lost in the adventure, knowing that you will be ready for wherever the day takes you. Learn from those willing to teach. Their wisdom and their strength will become yours. They will impart to you a tradition of education nationally recognized for its value. a tradition worthy of your best efforts. As young men and women of LaSalle, we will invest in you the guidance to blaze your own path, to go forth into the unknown with new certainty, to realize your full potential as professionals, as leaders, as citizens. To take up your place as the accountants, speech therapists, journalists, and CEOs of your generation. To impact this city and the world beyond. These adventures are yours, and you are ready for them. Explorers are never lost.
Hooked to the double feature and you're on my mind. Return of the creature, the crawler from the subway line. You're always keeping me waiting, keeping me waiting for you.
Welcome back to Freedom from Fire. I'm your host, Lieutenant Lisa Desamour. Keeping our firefighters safe is of the utmost importance to our department. That's why we teach and train our members about effective strategies they can use when evaluating a fire situation. The Incident Safety Officer works to ensure that safety is recognized in fireground tactics. Now, let's introduce our second guest. Please welcome Deputy Chief Troy Gore. Thank you, Chief.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Our
Thank
former
you.
Chief of Fire Prevention. We
Yes.
miss you. We miss you.
Oh.
But I'm actually excited to learn about the Incident Safety Office because this is actually going to be a more in-depth information, if you will, if I could
Right.
say it that way.
Right.
As always, I always ask my guests to please tell me a little bit about yourself.
I'm a firefighter. I've been on the department for 23 years, serving as the Fire Prevention Director, Fire Academy Director, and also served at Deputy 2, supervising half the city. Was an officer throughout the city, serving Southwest Philly, North Philly, and was a firefighter at Engine 50 station up in North Philly.
Okay. So you know a thing or two about a thing or two then.
Yeah, a little something.
Little something. Okay.
Little something,
Okay. So let's get right to it.
Okay.
How important is the actual role of Incident Safety Officer?
Well, just like in any occupation, safety is paramount. Is the overall safety of our members, making sure everyone goes home, is the absolute fundamental number one important job that we do every day. No matter what the assignment or the incident is, we'll risk life to save life, but we're not risking our lives to save property, sticks and bricks and
Right.
things of that nature. So our job is to make sure that we don't overextend our service to the city by risking our lives to save lives that are not in need of being saved.
I understand.
If we come up to a house or to a factory or to a building and it's already been compromised, there's no need to send our members in there to risk their lives to save property. That property manager has insurance. They're going to reestablish themselves, build from the ground up, but we can never recover a lost life of a mother, a father, a brother or sister from us losing our members
Right.
for an incident that we don't need to be in there fighting.
Right, and from the academy, from the very start, when you are in the academy as a cadet, that's the first thing, the priority. Life safety, incident stabilization,
That's right.
property conservation is last.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So what determines when you are actually dispatched to the fireground?
Well, I'm actually dispatched every time there is a full box and all hands are placed in service.
Okay.
whenever there's all hands placed in service, they dispatch the incident safety officer, SO1.
Okay.
We are now in a stages of trying to research ways that we can enhance that to 2 and 2 maybe, by assigning a battalion chief as incident safety officer also. Just trying to expand it. With the unfortunate death of Joyce Craig, Commissioner Till was able to find the funding and the grants to implement this new initiative of establishing a full incident safety officer 24/7. We're on 4 shifts. And every time there's, like I said, for all hands in service, we are dispatched to overall, to make sure the overall operational safety and each member and company operational, what they do in their own little grassroots area is done, conducted safely.
Okay. So what are your primary responsibilities as a safety officer when you're on the fire ground?
To provide communication and feedback and coordination with the incident safety officer, to observe all operations to make sure that they're being conducted in a safe and proper manner, based on the procedures that we got within the department. We also observe the little, as I spoke before, making sure members have their SCBAs on, and DPOPs have their helmets on, and you know, it's going as far as making sure our apparatuses are chalked properly. All those little things that we were deemed as being a nuisance to some members, we make sure that when we come on the fire ground that everybody straightens up a little bit. And we want that. We want that discipline to be maintained. We want them to say, oh, here comes a safety officer. So then it becomes a natural culture of the department. Whereas you ain't looking for us no more. You're just doing what you're supposed to be doing.
And that complacency factor is out.
Exactly, and that's the right word for it, because right now the department is kind of complacent, and we're trying to eliminate that complacency and prevent it from becoming a cultural thing. And we're trying to change the culture, because as you know, with injuries and accidents as it's being high right now, we're trying to get those numbers down, and then we're directly responsible for overseeing that aspect.
And as we know, really quick, I want to put this out there. When you talk about culture of the department, it's not just Philadelphia Fire. Unfortunately, a culture affects other departments as well, very similar. So, I mean, I think it's pretty cool that we're being very proactive, or trying to be proactive as it relates to safety. So what are some examples that you can share with us that you have personally experienced on the fire ground? Like I heard you a few moments ago, you talk about wheels, making sure they're chalked. Do you see that stuff often?
I see that a lot. And
Really?
I usually address the officer after I go to an incident.
Okay.
I write things down, and then I'll email that officer on the things that I observed and saw. I don't take, I mean, unless there's an immediate safety hazard, I stop all operations, stop it. But little nuisance, little things, whether it's SCBAs, whether it's uniforms, whether it's the wrong PPE gear and things of that nature, I email that officer and let them know what I observed, and make sure that they know that they need to correct it and change it. One of the things that I have noticed lately is fire is very dynamic, and that is being in that environment of being high dynamic it is, we have to be, as a department, we have to be as more aggressive in our reactive response.
Absolutely.
No, I'm sorry, more aggressive in our proactive.
I know what you meant.
And our proactive abilities to prevent the fire from happening in the first place. We're very aggressive with reacting, but we're kind of complacent on proacting. So when I get to a fire ground, I want to know what caused it. I know that's not my department, but little integral size up indicators that you gotta recognize to make sure that there is no propane tanks and things of that nature. So so that helps me to properly evaluate where my safety, what I call my little safety beam should go, and things of that nature. But I have observed that we're young as a department. We're not following the proper procedures of doing proper laddering, proper hose placement, proper apparatus placement, as we should be, which should be relayed back to our training. We have to correct those things. So
Yeah.
I see a lot of those things that can be kind of frustrating.
Absolutely.
But we are working on improving it.
Right, and I
by
think
day.
also we need to make sure that we kind of address, we should address that tunnel vision that we as firefighters tend to kind of adopt on the
Exactly.
fire ground, because you're that adrenaline rush and you're thinking about, that life safety factor. Sometimes that kind of, already puts into play, now you got tunnel vision, but you have to
Right.
recognize, and I think a part of your role is recognizing the bigger picture,
That's it.
the overall picture.
Right.
If you're responding to, a special hazards type of place, you got to think about those things. You got to
Right.
think about, is there a propane tank, or is there some other, cylinder with other gases?
Right.
So that is really good.
Right.
So what would you say, to close it out, what would you say is the most often overlooked safety issue as it relates to that?
Well, you're touching my heart because you know where my heart is at. So the overall safety issue is prevention.
Okay.
And as I stated before, we need to be more proactive in preventing the incident from occurring in the first place.
Yep, I agree.
Because if we're not fighting fires, we're all being safe. So the overall thing that I think we need to be more involved, we need to hold our officers more accountable.
Okay.
And getting out and educating our communities on the practice of safety and recognizing safe hazards throughout their homes and things of that nature to preventing the fires, thereby preventing the fires from occurring in the first place.
Thank you, Chief. That was a lot of information in a short amount of time, but I certainly appreciate you
Thanks for
coming with
having
me
me.
today, coming
Thanks for
with us
having me.
here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that will do it for our show today. Please remember, the Fire Department's annual Women's Day Conference is fast approaching. This year in 2020, the conference will take place March 6th and 7th at the American Red Cross Blood Donor Site located 700 Spring Garden Street. Along with the Red Cross, we've partnered with Philadelphia Police, the Office of Emergency Management, and the Philadelphia Fire Department Foundation. Remember, if you would like to find out more about us on LaSalle TV, you can check out our social media sites. And if you're interested in learning about the Philadelphia Fire Department, visit our Facebook, Twitter, and web pages. Also check out Fireman's Hall Museum located 147 North 2nd Street in the Old City section of our city. I would like to once again thank our guests for joining us today. I also would like to thank you for tuning in and watching. So until next time, remember, fire is everyone's fight. Stay safe and remain free from fire.